Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Vedic Conversation, where each episode we take a different topic and look at it through the lens of storytelling and from the perspective of the Veda, an ancient but still very relevant body of knowledge from India. I'm Anthony Thompson, a Vedic meditation teacher based in London, and I'm joined by my Vedic colleagues Derrick Yanford in New York and Rory Kinsella in Sydney. In this episode, we're joined by our very special guest, Jillian Lavender, who lives and works in London. I first met Jillian over 12 years ago in the early days of her successful meditation business, the London Meditation Centre, which she runs with her partner, Michael Miller. Prior to teaching meditation, Jillian, who's from New Zealand, was a successful corporate executive in several areas, and latterly publisher of a pan-European newspaper targeting the financial services sector. It is thanks to her wealth of experience and deep knowledge of Vedic meditation that I find myself talking to you now. As a teacher and mentor, Jillian has taught thousands of people to meditate, or, as in my case, get back on track. Jillian is an expert in Ayurveda and consults on health, diet, sleep, fertility, and lifestyle, and she said that her use of Ayurveda helped her conceive and produce Loie, a delightfully happy and healthy little girl. Let's get into the conversation, and don't forget to stick around until the end, where we'll share with you how you can become involved in the conversation. So, hello and welcome to this episode of the Vedic Conversation, and our guest this week is Jillian Lavender. Jillian is very special to me because she was the teacher that I first met quite some time ago who helped me get back on track. In fact, it was over 13 years ago. Jillian lives in London. Her partner, Michael Miller, and she run the very successful London Meditation Centre. They have a little girl, Loie, who is coming up, I think, for about eight years old now. And I've known Loie all her life, and she's a very, very special little person, and an absolute delight. Jillian has lived in Australia, New Zealand, Europe, America, and is now living with Michael and Loie in London. And Jillian has been a teacher for 18 years and was one of the very first Vedic meditation teachers to graduate from Tom Mills's academy, so to speak. And Jillian has a great interest in Ayurveda and is about to publish a book this July, which is very exciting. It's called Why Meditate? Because It Works. I've already placed my order with Amazon. And a big welcome to you, Jillian.
Thank you so much. So lovely to be here with you. Thank you.
It's terrific. I'm going to kick off by asking you, over the 18 years that you've been teaching meditation, the landscape's changed a great deal in the past decade, particularly with things like mindfulness and apps which have flooded the market. Is this sustainable, and what comes next?
Well, I have seen a lot of change in the time that I have been teaching. And when I first started teaching, before all of the apps and before mindfulness had really sort of hit the ground, when even talking about stress was kind of, it was people didn't quite get it. If going into organizations, it was like pushing on a closed door. They weren't really, people weren't talking about mental health and all of that stuff, not in the way that they're doing it now. And so I found that it was a little bit more sluggish. There were people that would pop up and who were wanting this knowledge. However, it wasn't as, it was a little bit more sort of treacle-like. And then, of course, we had the move towards mindfulness, and then technology sort of moving with that, and in the development of all of the apps. And I think in the time that I have seen that progression as a teacher, what I've witnessed is a very strong embrace of that, as I'm sure you can all agree, Although what I'm also seeing in the work that I'm doing is that the kind of the product life cycle of that is shifting a bit. And so where many people have tried one of those products, they find relatively quickly, actually, that in the main, this is that there's a lack of sustainability with it. So to put that in context, when I give an introductory talk and I say, how many people have tried meditation? 9 out of 10 hands go up. Now that would have been different back 18 years ago. Wouldn't have got 90%. Then when I say, okay, so how many of you are meditating every day? You have a daily practice. The hands go down. And, I might have sort of 1 or 2 hands left up. And when you dig a little bit deeper and you get under the bonnet, what you find is that they have tried something. They have invariably quite often tried an app. What they report to me again and again is that they haven't found that to be something that draws them towards committing to a daily practice. They haven't found it smooth and easy and worth the time and effort, actually. So I'll have many people who say, well, I did it for a few days, or I did it for a while, and then I sort of didn't work. And then, I can count on one hand. I have one guy who had been doing one of these apps, the app shall remain nameless, for 2 years. I was like, that is dedication, and then he came along and learned Vedic meditation, and now he's off and running, and he's not doing any of that. But that's very, very rare. I would say more often than not, people have dabbled with it, but they haven't sustained it.
Do you think?
I think to the point about the life cycle of this, I think what is happening is that the barrier to entry is quite low. People are jumping in and they are having a go at it, and it's like they've got that first sort of foot on the first rung of the ladder, but then they kind of fall off because it's not really delivering. And I think that's a double-edged sword, because the positive is, well, I've had a taste of this and I've got a sense that there's something more there. I'll keep going on my journey of discovery. The flip side is, oh, I tried meditation. It didn't work for me, or I'm not good at it. I'll move on and do something else. And I see both of those things playing out. But I do see the life cycle of some of these things sort of going through where people have sort of done it. And for those that are looking for more, I think we are well positioned with what it is that we offer in terms of the really essential practice and the depth of the knowledge that we have and the depth of support that we have for people. It's going to be very positive. I'm going to be very busy.
What's usually the biggest preconception a student has before learning, and what's the biggest mistake they make after learning? Well, let's say, rather the biggest, shall we say the most usual?
Yeah. I think that it is that little thing, that niggling little thought that's there for so many people. I'm not going to be able to do this. My mind is so busy. I'm just not going to be able to quieten it down. So there's that. And I think that's a really, and that's related, and I talk about this in the book, related to a misconception that meditation is something that involves clearing out thoughts and, all of that hard work. And they, at some very deep level, know that that's actually not going to work. and so, I'll always have it in intro talk, and I'm sure you guys are the same. Somebody very bravely sort of puts their hand up and says, well, have you ever had anybody that this hasn't worked for? Is this, and you know that everybody else in the room has been thinking that same question, but just didn't have the nerve to ask it. And then you can, go through that whole explanation to deal with those sort of insecurities. So I think this disconnect between their idea that it's going to be something difficult and they've got to be really focused and disciplined, and how the heck are they going to do that? And a sense of, well, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to do this. So I think that's a really big thing. And because so many techniques out there ask you to, try to stop thinking, or you engage with a lot of effort. And this whole idea of effortlessness is just, groundbreaking, really. Where else in life have you been told that success will be connected to you doing less and not more? It just doesn't, it's not the way it works. So I think that's quite a thing. Sorry, what was the second part of your question, Anthony?
What's the biggest mistake people make having learned Vedic meditation? What's the most consistent mistake that you see cropping up?
Oh, the thoughts are a part of meditation, and this undoing this idea that something other than sitting there thinking about whether they put the laundry on or not is, should be happening. This idea that they are not getting to the goal, or they're not doing it right because they are experiencing a tsunami of thoughts in their 20-minute sitting of meditation. I think, that's what I spend most of my time doing as a teacher, is reassuring people that thoughts are a part of meditation. And, getting them in the room and giving them the mantra and doing all of that, is a beautiful and important part of the process, and so important that we get that right. And really the work that we do as teachers is to reassure and guide our students from that point on. And so much of it has to do with matching up their experience with what they think should be happening. And so often there's a disconnect, and it's getting those things together. And it's all to do with thoughts.
I think it's quite often a case where people are expecting a result and getting their head around the idea that this is a process, that in a sense the journey is more important than the destination, that we don't have this objective. Everything in our lives is all about getting to the objective, getting to the point. And I think that can be something that
it's that sort of instant fix. And although, having said that, as we know, you have people on your course and they're there for 4 days, and at the end of those 4 days they're noticing changes, and I'm always in awe of that, the process itself, because I've never had anybody, and I've taught thousands and thousands of people to meditate, I've never had anybody who has been on a course and not noticed something at the end of those 4 days. And that's 4 days in a row. It's not even like 4 days over 4 weeks. So I just find that it gives me a buzz every time. It's like, and even if they're feeling wiped out, or at least they're noticing something's shifting, I think that's just wonderful.
I'm curious, because 2021, with the pandemic, with all these apps that are available, so many people are probably more drawn to meditation than ever before. But for you, having become a teacher 18 years ago, and then you actually learning to meditate before that, what was the draw for you? What was the impetus that got you to seek out a meditation practice?
Oh, we're going back in time here. So
back to another century.
I speak very honestly here. I didn't come to this knowledge with very lofty sort of sense of, I'm going to achieve enlightenment, or I'm going to, those words were not in my vocabulary. Consciousness, none of that. I was a bit of a stress bag. I was tired. I was jet lagged all the time because I was flying long haul with my job. I was worrying. I was not happy. I was just off. And I had witnessed and tired all the time, just so tired. And I had witnessed change in a person close to me when they learned to meditate. And it was that. And I always remember this other thing that happened was when I went to the introductory talk at my teacher's house in Jersey Road in Sydney, at Tom's residence there. I remember walking out, and very distinctly on the way out, I picked up a piece of paper. They had these sort of handouts, and the handout had a bit of blurb, and on the back there were it was divided up into four, and there were 4 graphs, and there were 4 research studies about the effects of meditation. And I really think that tipped me over the edge into doing it, because I had there was this science here, and there were these graphs, and it was like, yes, this is not wacky and it's not weird, because I was worried about that. I didn't come from any of that sort of background, and I didn't want any of that. And I saw that, and I was like, right, I'm going to do this, not knowing where it was going to take me at all. So it was a very much one of those moments that I think we can point to in our lives where we just go for it, and we follow a feeling, and we jump in, and we don't quite know where it's taking us. There's just this underlying sense of, yeah, I'm going to do this. And that's where I started from, really. And then, of course, it progressed and developed and consolidated. But that took some time. That took some time for me to get to the point where I was ending up doing my training to be a teacher. So, yeah, it was pretty practical, really, when I think about it, what I was looking for. I just didn't want to be so tired, and I didn't want to be so anxious, and I wanted to sleep better, and, all that stuff.
So I'm curious, too. So your transition from whatever career that you had before to becoming a Vedic meditation teacher and doing it full time, did you get any pushback from your family, like, you're crazy, what are you doing? Or, you know what I mean? Because I feel like even for myself, making that transition was a little scary, but I'd known so many people who had already done it. So I was like, oh, these people have done it, I can do it. I'm not sure that you would have had that same kind of example to follow.
I didn't. It's a really good point. I didn't know anybody really that was in this whole world. And so I didn't have that sort of community or those role models around me. I felt like I was sort of the electron that was sort of spinning off in its own orbit. And I think, where I had been in terms of very full on and it going down a corporate, I was in a CEO role. I was very, very committed to that path. And relatively quickly, I was like, I'm off, saying, right, I'm giving all that away, and I'm going to go to Flagstaff, and I'm going to spend a year here training to be a teacher of Vedic meditation. And my parents were like, because they're not from this world at all, And I remember my father saying to me, he says, are you happy? And I'm like, yes, I'm really happy about doing it. He's like, okay, fine. That's they didn't get it, but they were like, okay. Because, it was a bit out there, and it was very different from what I've been doing. So it's kind of, actually, when I think about it, it's kind of amazing that actually did happen, I just followed a feeling, I guess. And I sort of got myself into a certain position and place and kind of made it happen. And I didn't, and here's that classic thing, I didn't think about it that much. It was happening. And if I point to all the things in my life where, really big transitions happened, it wasn't because I was thinking about it too much. It was just, you jump. And that was a really good example of that for me.
Because in a way you sort of burnt your boats. It was that sort of feeling of, there's only one way and that's forward. And I think it's very
and it had personal consequences for me because, I was with somebody in a long-term relationship and I made that decision to go into that direction. And if you look at what it was that was driving me in terms of my work as a senior executive, actually it was the thing I was good at was working with people and managing people and leading people and creating an environment where people wanted to be. And I loved working with them and developing them. And so there's a lot of complementarity with what it is that I do in my current role, mentoring and guiding and inspiring and getting people going. But, personally, there I was with this guy who, so there I don't know if I've told so many people this. I was 4 weeks into my training. I'd gone to Flagstaff. I'd actually been planning to only be there for sort of 6 months. I was going to be sort of fast tracked through and then come back to London. And 4 weeks in, and I get this call from my then partner, saying, I can't do this, it's all over, kind of thing. And it turned out that, yes, that was, that's what happened. And so I had this huge unraveling of that going on in this whole transition. So it was a transition on so many levels. And I guess when all those sort of things fell away and then I was really on my own, and then it was like, okay, well, now I am going to go with this because there's not much else happening. So it was quite a, for me, it was quite a big shift.
That's huge. I mean, I'm always just so curious about everybody's choice to do that and the challenges, because from what I understand too, like you said, you knew that you were signing on for 6 months or whatever, where now it's a little bit more, oh, we're going to go away for 3 months. I can talk to other people or whatnot. But like you said, you had no idea what you were getting yourself into. And here you are. I think it's a testament, if anything, that we're going to inspire our students as well. If you're thinking about meditating or not, there is a leap and all these great, beautiful, and wonderful things can happen. And I think it's really great that we're having this conversation so people can hear your story about, you're a pioneer in a way. I feel like you were doing something that nobody else was doing that could have, turned out a lot differently. And here you are, so I think it's a testament.
Yes. And I guess, if you think about what we were just talking about earlier, it wasn't like, meditation market was kicking off and it was the place to be, it was still weird, it was like, and it wasn't really mainstream, so, it wasn't like, okay, well, this is an obvious kind of, option. It wasn't really at all in that sense. And so consequently, my training ended up being like 14 months and, ended up staying next time. I thought, okay, I'm going to stay here for a while. So I don't know, it's very interesting. And it was an interesting experience because, I'd been in a trajectory in terms of my career where, it was going up and the next level and then the next level. And, there's a nice stable monthly paycheck coming in and all those things, gone. Really, when you think about it, it's like, God, how did this happen?
And did you have many doubts in the early days? Did you have a point where you were like, have I made the wrong decision here? When you'd come back from Flagstaff and you were out there in the world as a teacher?
Not doubts about, have I done the right thing, or was that the right thing to have done? I didn't have those kinds of thoughts. Maybe, a little bit, but not really. That wasn't dominating for me. I think actually one of the things I grappled with early on was how to reintegrate myself into the world. And I remember going out for lunch with a very old friend of mine, and he was a meditator. He had been meditating for a long time, very successful guy. And I had been having some conversation with him about, issues I was having about sort of finding a kind of people to hang out with. It was kind of lonely, and dating and all those kinds of things. And I was sort of saying, well, I just want to be normal, or some words to that effect. And he goes, well, you're not normal. And I was like, and that was my issue. That was sort of, how do I navigate this and find my spot? Because, a lot of the people I was meeting were my students, and it's not like you're going to get all social and chummy with your student. It's a different relationship, and it has to be. So I think that integration and sort of carving out my space and my role was actually the thing that I had to deal with the most in the beginning, actually. And it took a while. And it was quite a solo kind of time, even, and I'd just been in a very solo period in terms of being in Flagstaff, nobody else around, living in this cabin on Tom's property, a lot of time on my own, and then I sort of came back, and I felt that more when I was back in the world, actually. Yeah. But I didn't feel, oh God, what have I, it wasn't that so much, but it was just sort of working out how I, where I was within the rest of society, as it were.
And how did you find London, how receptive London was compared, like you've been living in Sydney, where, in Bondi here, there's probably 30 Vedic meditation teachers that I could find. And at that time, I guess there was a lot fewer in London. Did you find that it was harder to kind of get people interested?
Yes, there was nobody who was teaching under the terms of Vedic meditation. There was the TM organization, Transcendental Meditation. I wasn't hanging out with other teachers. So I was quite, I really had to build up my practice and when I say practice, my teaching practice on my own. And I would have loved to have had a kind of more of a community of people that I could have bounced ideas off and talked with and learned from, but I didn't have that. I guess, what I had been conditioned to do and instructed to do and encouraged to do by my teacher was to get out there and do your thing. And so I was very conscious of that. I wasn't going back to my teacher and asking if, sometimes if I had something, I would go and ask, but that connection had shifted too, so I really felt that. And coming back to London at that time, as I was saying earlier, it wasn't as if the receptivity was not as much as what it is now, for example. It's very different marketplace. It wasn't like that. There was less awareness of it. And interestingly, in areas where you might have thought, oh, in the yoga community or in these sorts of areas, they'll be open to it. actually I found they were less open because they had their own thing going on, and they were doing it, they had their own sort of spiritual track that they were sort of going down, and pretty committed to that practice. And so it was, it took some sort of staying power, working through that and just building one meditator at a time, building that up. And it was from a small base, and I'm not from London. I'm born and raised in New Zealand. I spent a lot of my time prior to that living in Sydney and Paris. And so I wasn't connected to this place. I didn't have people that I went to school with and university with, and that wasn't available to me. I did start doing some work in the city. I'd been asked to go and do some consulting with my sort of old hat on. And that was great in that it just got me in front of people. And, I ended up sort of in a CEO role, and I was doing that 4 days a week. And then I was building up my meditation business, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And that actually opened up, many people learning to meditate. But yeah, it was slow going in the beginning.
I'm very pleased that you were doing some research amongst the yoga community, because if you hadn't been at the yoga show at Earl's Court in November 2008, I wouldn't have met you. And we wouldn't be having this conversation. And, I was there because I was heavily into Ashtanga yoga at the time. And, it was a kind of a place to meet other yogis and, perhaps buy another mat or a prop or whatever it was. And there you were, alone on this stand. I think, if memory serves me right, you just had on the back, "Do you want to learn to meditate?" And I had been looking for a teacher for 37 years because I'd been taught and abandoned. And so I thought, wow, here is somebody who's a meditation teacher. It's a real live, and a very pretty one as well, a real live meditation teacher. Let me go and talk to you. And we talked, and I said, and you said to me, I told you that I meditated, and then you explained that you were teaching Vedic meditation. And 4 days later, I was in your flat. You introduced me to Michael, and you just, and we had a meditation one-on-one, and away I went. And, it's just, and, and then I found out that you lived just around the corner, it was just extraordinary how it all sort of fell into place. It was wonderful.
I remember it so well. And it's amazing to me. Did you say that's 13 years ago that?
Yep, November 2008.
Yeah, it's just incredible. And as I had said to you on previous occasions, turning up, it was the first time we'd done the yoga show, and I was like, oh, we're not doing this again, because it was like, you were the one person that actually really got it, and most people were there in their lycra looking for more lycra. It was not actually a big market for us at that point, and these are all generalizations, of course, but it was quite obvious that was not going to be the area that we were going to start to really sort of explode from. Interesting.
I'd like to just turn the topic to Ayurveda, which I know is a very important part of your life and an important part of your teaching. You have a very strong relationship with the Raju family in Hyderabad. Do you find now that there's increasing interest in Ayurveda and what it offers? I know you've talked about the sort of spa Ayurvedic dilution of the kind of intrinsic value of Ayurveda. And there are certain sort of personalities that perhaps are now using Ayurveda as part of their sort of promotional material to be seen as part of the zeitgeist. That's obviously, and we see that with meditation as well. But I'd love to know more about your interest in Ayurveda and how that started.
Yes, it's grown to be a really a deep and fundamental part of my life and of my teaching, actually. I see I see a great thirst for it as my students develop and as their state of consciousness becomes broader and their nervous system is more refined. There's just those natural upgrades on so many levels, and in terms of what they consume and how they consume and all those things, there's just a natural coming together of all of that. And so it comes from that comes from a place of personal experience in terms of knowing the impact that it has had on my own life, and then seeing that interest in my students. And I think it's an area that we're in the early days of it, and I think it's going to become increasingly attractive. And there's a real opportunity for those that, just like with meditation, that whole area is maturing, and there is going to be a draw towards Ayurvedic knowledge that is pure and yet accessible. And when you think about what it is that we offer with Vedic meditation, it is pure knowledge, and it's highly accessible in 2021. And the challenge and opportunity is to do the same with Ayurveda, so that the purity is there, the depth of the understanding, and present it and package it and deliver it and explain it in a way that people can actually use in their lives in a big city in 2021. This is, I think, something that we will see more and more of a draw towards, because people, the collective is upgrading in terms of what people are wanting, and they want more things that work. And I think, but I think a lot of Ayurveda has been a bit of that, as you say, that spa Ayurveda, which is very surface level, and it has, people think of, oil dripping on their forehead and a bit of Vata Pitta Kapha, and it gets a bit confused and it gets diluted, and it loses its power. So we'll see more of this, and I think it's an interesting area for us as teachers to witness the changes that we see in our students, and to be able to support them with all sorts of knowledge, and steer them and see how their appetite increases for these things. And it's such a natural fit with what we're doing with the meditation. And it's, as I say, the personal impact that it's had for me has been really quite profound in terms of, how I eat and how I live my life. And so, yeah.
I'm curious, with your interest in Ayurveda and with your history of teaching or whatnot, how, after having your daughter come into the world and raising her and watching how everything is changing, how did it affect your teaching? Only because, you being a Vedic meditation teacher, Michael being one, having this child, I'm just curious how that influenced or changed what it was you were doing, knowing that there's this little person taking all their cues off of the two of you, and how you're preparing her for this world that's ever changing. I'm just curious how that impacted your teaching, or how you see things differently having a child now.
Well, I think it's a really interesting question. I think on a practical point, I notice in everything that I do now as a mother, I'm more focused, and that may be just from the simple basics of I have less time, so I am very efficient. I'm not mucking about. If I find that my relationship to time. You know, I'm certainly not sitting around doing the crossword on the Guardian. You know, I am very that relationship to time and my focus and attention just through the practical, you know, what I have going on in my life is one thing. And I think that may in fact have influenced my teaching in that, you know, where I might have faffed about a bit, or I might have blah, 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 or I might have indulged people, not interested, you know. It's like, I'm here. I know what I can do. I know what I can offer you. Are you ready? Come on, let's do it. You know, and if you're not, you know, whereas in the past I might have just sort of, I don't want to say wasted time, but allowed more time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, you know, come on, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a really interesting thing in terms of how I think about this, and because of the need of the time, you know, precious days and nights are passing. Let's do this. Let's get on with it, you know. And so whereas in the early days as a teacher, when I had less confidence of myself as a teacher, I was, no question, more indulgent in a way that I'm not now. And I don't think that's a bad thing, actually. You know, I think it's maybe that speaks to my sense of my own capabilities, and it's just experience, I guess, you know, and my confidence around it. And I think it is related to having, you know, become a mother, you know, I was 46 when I had Loie. She's now 7, you know, so I had ticked a lot of things off my, you know, list, you know, I'd done things. And so then I had this little one at, you know, a later stage, than a lot older than most mums, and that had all happened naturally. And so I think, you know, I bring to that whole experience a level of experience and knowledge that you know, is significant. And I can see that playing out in the kinds of conversations that she and I are having, or that we're having as a family. And it's really interesting, having been in this process of lockdown, and I've been doing a lot of homeschooling and all of that, but I can see, you know, changes in her vocabulary and the questions that she's asking. And that's just that proximity, you know, she's getting a lot of us. And she's witnessing me do the puja, and she's seeing, you know, it's there and on all sorts of levels. And, you know, we'll have a talk about, oh no, Loie, let's not eat that now. And then we end up talking about digestion, you know, and then she'll start, and then there's a little kind of softly little Ayurveda moment in there, you know. It's not because I'm sitting her down and we're having an Ayurveda lesson, but she's getting knowledge that, you know, Emma, our assistant, you know, she overheard one of our conversations. She goes, she's 7 and she's getting that talk, you know. I was like, you know, I wish I'd had that when I was 37, you know. So yeah, you know, interesting.
I think it's one of the serendipities of the kind of lockdown, that, you know, this the increased intimacy that we have with our children, if we have children living with us. I don't, but it's part of that homeschooling idea that you're not having a mathematics class or a physics class, you're baking a cake, and then you weave in the mathematics, the measurements, and then you talk about the science of cooking and the Ayurveda. And so everything is multi-level instead of it all being compartmentalized. It's the real application of this knowledge to life, you know, which is such a valuable lesson. And I think, you know, we live in a world where so much knowledge is compartmentalized. You know, how do you actually apply this, and how do I use it, and you know, and how can I sort of appreciate the benefits continuously or often, rather than just in a piecemeal fashion. I think it's a fantastic lesson. She's a lucky kid.
Yeah, and it can be some really, things that I guess we as adults probably take for granted. But let's say she spills something and drops and everything goes, all goes a bit, upside down. What's my response to that situation? What does she witness from me? Does she witness somebody losing it and having a meltdown, or does she witness me handling it in a more expansive, balanced, calm way? I'm not saying I'm saintly at all, I don't mean to present it, but on balance, she's seeing responses to everyday situations that are not full of stress. It's what it comes back to. And so she sees people who are laughing. She sees people who are, sitting down, closing their eyes. She's exposed to that. So I think it's just there sort of on every level. It's very, very interesting. And it, who knows where that will end up. It's a interesting one, because I'm really conscious of not, pushing it on her, because that could backfire. So let's see when we get to teenage years, but it's yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks for sticking around till the end. This season, we want to engage with you, our audience, and would love to know what topics and themes would be of interest to you. Also, would you like to be our guest? Perhaps you might be interested in coming on the show and talking with us. We'd love to have you. Please share your thoughts and ideas with us with a direct message on our Instagram account. And for those of you who are not camera shy, please feel free to share a video with the hashtag #TheVedic Conversation.